So myself and some councillors and staff attended the Assembly of First Nations Special Assembly, which was held in Ottawa the first week of December. And it started off with a special honoring for Levi Oakes, who is a 92-year-old veteran from Akwesasne. He was a Mohawk code talker during World War II. He was honored at the Assembly, and he was later honored in the House of Commons on Parliament Hill. There was also an honoring for the late Chief Harry St. Denis from Barrier Lake, who recently passed away. We also, during the Assembly, received notice that Elder Elmer Corshane from Manitoba, who was a long-standing elder at the Assemblies, had passed away as well. So condolences to those two families. At most of the Ontario delegates during that first day of the Assembly attended the youth rally on Parliament Hill that was put on by the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians Youth Council to stop the federal framework. I attended and spoke as I was invited to by the youth. And there were several folks from Six Nations who got up at 3 a.m. to catch the bus at 4:30 to take part in that rally. And while we were up there rallying, Carolyn Bennett, the Minister of Indigenous Crown Relations, was addressing the chiefs who were back at the Assembly. Apparently, she said that the framework was done or was on hold, but people aren't really sure that that's actually happening. There were also, when we went back to the Assembly, there were concurrent dialogue sessions and resolutions on languages, child welfare, education, particularly post-secondary, and fisheries. At the end of the day, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended the Assembly and repeated that he wants to work as partners and said that reconciliation is about action and about closing the gap. He said that 73 boil water advisories have been lifted and that they are on track to eliminate all of them by 2021. He also said that they have received 171,000 requests under Jordan's Principle, and he mentioned that they want to vamp up the specific and comprehensive land claims policies, and also said that 2019 will be the International Language Year. The Indigenous Languages Act is set to be introduced in January of 2019. The Prime Minister also said that they want to change the fiscal policy and the fiscal relationship, and he continued to talk about continuing to rebuild and renew the relationship with Indigenous peoples. The second day began with a presentation by Jane Philpott, who is the Minister of Indigenous Services. She spoke mainly about the child welfare system and the intention to co-create legislation on child welfare for introduction in January. She also mentioned infrastructure and housing and the enormous gaps that exist. She also talked about the boil water advisories that have been lifted and said that they need to expand the scope to include wastewater projects. She also said that they will be seeking further feedback on the Safe Drinking Water Act, and apparently the AFN is holding some engagement and sessions on this. With respect to housing, Minister Philpott said that 10,000 homes have been built or renovated, but that still leaves a request for 4,000 more homes. There is a data collection process going on right now, and there is still more work to be done with respect to securing more housing dollars. She also said that they want to speed up the additions to reserve process, and we will be giving her a list of the requests that we want to speed up. There were more concurrent dialogue sessions and resolutions on the environment and climate change, on health, particularly the non-insured health benefits, on economic partnerships, on early learning and childcare. There were presentations by Minister Catherine McKenna, the Minister of Environment, and by Minister Patricia Hadju, who is the Minister of the Employment, Workforce, Development and Labour. At the end of the second day, the 5 large First Nations, which include Six Nations, Tyendinaga, Akwesasne, Oneida and Wikwemikong, had our own meeting with Minister Philpott, and we talked about the discrepancy in funding that the large First Nations deal with because of the unfair funding formulas. I asked her if we could have direct agreements between Treasury Board and Six Nations before any money for Ontario gets thrown into a formula fight. We also asked about assistance related to economic development so that we could start to make our own money. She agreed to continue discussion so that on top-up agreements and also a direct relationship with the large First Nations. She also agreed to speed up the additions to reserve program and to ask the Minister of Finance to meet with us regarding the $350 million that GRE pays to the Government of Canada. They are also going to take another look at the way the funding for Jordan's Principle is dispersed. Right now, people have to put their money up front and get reimbursed, which is not a good thing to do. On the last day, there was an update on policing. There is no secretariat at the AFN office for either policing or justice, and nothing was reported on justice. With respect to the policing report, it did not include any new information other than that they are working on getting policing declared as an essential service. There were then brief messages from Elizabeth May, the Green Party leader, and Jagmeet Singh, who is the NDP leader. Andrew Scheer, who is the Progressive Conservative leader, spoke, and I understand he was booed by the Chiefs as he could not explain how he would do things differently than Stephen Harper. On the last day, I had meetings with a few cabinet ministers. One of them was Ralph Goodale, the Minister of Public Safety. We brought up our application for 8 additional police officers, and we were informed that we would hear about our application in a couple of weeks. We also asked whether we could open up our current agreement for further negotiations. This may be difficult to do, as Ontario would also have to agree, and with the new government in Ontario, this may not easily be done. We also asked about additional funding for cameras at main intersections and additional funding to bring in other police officers during emergencies. Minister Goodale's staff will follow up on this with Minister Philpott's office. We also asked for a meeting between the First Nations Chiefs of Police Association and Minister Goodale. I also mentioned that we wanted further discussions on the justice system in light of the Bushy-Stiers cases. Minister Goodale said that one thing to look at related to more permanent funding is to look at a legislative base for funding police services. He also suggested that policing should be part of the larger fiscal table. It was at this point that we suggested that they should settle Six Nations land rights, and we presented him with a copy of our global solution and explained that this would be the best solution for us. We then joined the Akwesasne Grand Chief in a meeting with Minister Bill Blair, Minister responsible for border crossing and organized crime reduction. We talked to him about cannabis and said that we felt that First Nations should get some of the revenue sharing. We told him that we did not want to get into the same situation as tobacco, and that we did not want to see any businesses pay the excise tax, such as what GRE pays. In fact, we asked him too to help arrange a meeting for us with the Minister of Finance to discuss this. We explained that we were doing our own licensing and regulations, and that we also wanted to explore economic opportunities. Minister Blair said that he wanted to work with us and discuss sharing of the revenues. He also stressed that we need to involve the provinces. We also asked for a further meeting on border crossing issues and said that the Government of Canada should just recognize the Jay Treaty. We then met with Minister Kirsty Duncan, the Minister of Tourism, Sport and Culture, and we spoke to her about funding for the lacrosse teams for the 2021 Canada Summer Games. She assured us that they are following up on this quite actively. We also brought her up to date on the Ontario Sports Body and informed her that the Chiefs in Ontario had passed a resolution to replace the President and the Board of the Aboriginal Sports and Wellness Council. We also mentioned the 2020 NAIG, North American Indigenous Games, and asked for her support in getting Buddy Miracle inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame as the first Indigenous NHL hockey player. We also invited her to visit our community.